Hi, this is John with Fix It Planet. Today we're going to be working on this HTC 10. This is the 2PS 6400. This phone in front of us right now is actually a donor that was sent in with a customer who just wants us to take the battery out of this one and the charging dock connector, or the full assembly of the charging dock, because he's tried to work on another one and damaged some of the pins and stuff on, and we'll point this out later. So we already have one phone that's opened part of the way, and we're going to take this one apart. But what we want to do is sort of the idea behind this part of the video is so that we can demonstrate the process for getting the screen off. And since the screen is very thin and very fragile, we really want to avoid damaging it if we want to reuse it. Otherwise, we're just going to have to replace the screen. Probably you might want to prepare yourself to replace the screen, because this can be very susceptible to damage when you're trying to remove the screen. So one of the things we've got going for us right now is this thin steel tool, but there's still some pitfalls here. So very little space on the sides there. And we have two capacitive buttons at the bottom, one right here, one right here, that we also don't want to damage, and of course the home button itself. So there's lots of little pitfalls in here. In fact, this phone has got them everywhere, like little landmines waiting to blow up and ruin your day. So I hope to point out some of these type of pitfalls and things to worry about or watch over to protect yourself against if you intend to do this repair yourself. So there is only adhesive around the edges of the screen, around the border. There is none behind the display, unlike a lot of the Samsungs. So you just need to break the seal all the way around the edges. And of course, there's going to be cables and little contacts that stick out. You've got power button, flex button cables along the edges here. All these things are just literally on the edge, waiting for you to cut into them or break them off. And of course, we have the display assembly itself, which is, if you just look at it wrong, it might break. So I'm going to go really fairly slow to take this off, because I don't want to put any additional stress on the screen than what is necessary to get it loose. So we're just going to try to cut into the adhesive here, and down here at the bottom I'm trying to avoid damaging the two capacitive touch sensors or the home button cable. So the adhesive is very, very strong and stubborn and does not want to let go. But we'll use that to our advantage later on. So if you're wanting to replace the screen, you will probably want to put some new adhesive on here, but in this video we're not actually going to go that far. We're simply going to go through the process of what's required, and we'll be just using the old adhesive, which, you know, isn't really gonna hold if you want it to be permanent. But for our purposes, it'll stick right back on and stay where we want it to. So you can just see down inside there the two capacitive sensors, similar to the Galaxy S7, S6, and some of the previous models of the Galaxy S series. And then there's the home button. You can also see that. We'll pull one of those out and put it back in later on in the video. So you can see that the adhesive really does not want to let go. So it will hold fine later on. For the purpose of this video, we'll hold the screen on just fine when we go to put everything back. Now we're just checking to see that we haven't damaged the screen, that it does actually power on and respond to touch. I don't know what the service update thing is, but it prevents me from doing anything. It won't respond. But the screen is fine. Don't know what's going on with that button. It's waiting for me to put the SIM card in, I believe. So it refuses to go away until I put that in. But we're not going to. So we don't care about all that. Now we've got screws all along the sides and on the top and the bottom that are holding in a mid-frame to the rear housing. Now these on the top and bottom are going to be kind of long. The ones on the side are not so long. You can see the difference here. And I'm just probably using a T4. Those are, I think, T5 screws, but I'm probably using a T4. I can't really see the tip anymore, and I don't remember. Anyway, the screws themselves are T5s. Yeah, that's my T4 tip. So you can use a T5, though. That's what the screws are, except for the little ones on the side there. Or are they? Actually, I think they are. The ones on the side, yeah, I think the ones on the side are slightly different. Crap, I can't remember now. Let me see. Yeah, so all of those screws that we took out of the midframe are all Phillips head screws. So major correction there. Not a T4, not a T5. Those are Phillips head. Top, bottom, and sides for the midframe. But once you get inside, different story. Now, all along the edges here, you can actually see there's lots of little things, copper-looking things. So this mid-frame's got a couple of little power buttons that can fall out. So keep an eye on those. But inside here, all of the screws are going to be T5. And all the way around at the bottom down here on the right, at the top on the left, everywhere there's going to be little copper looking contacts. All these little contact points are fragile and will bend easily or break off. Also around this power button right there is a little component, and some more over here that I see broken off all the time from people digging at the connector for the battery. So pay attention, don't knock those off. I think there's 5 antenna cables. See, 1, 2, 3, 4. Pretty sure there's 5. And lots of little connectors for these little cables. Lots of tape. So before you start to disconnect anything, you may want to for sure do a inspection, a visual inspection. Make sure you haven't damaged any of the contact points all the way around. And just make sure that none of the cables have been torn. But you may also want to take a photo so that you can remember where everything goes, because there's a lot of stuff here. Now here under this tape, don't be fooled. There's nothing under there. So the board's not ready to come out yet. Down on the bottom, you've got some tape that's kind of stuck to one of the cables. And these screws that don't really have to come out, but I just do that so that you can see there are additional screws. But that board can actually stay in place. Underneath here is some tape sort of holding that cable. And there's the vibrator that's actually soldered to the board. And that'll have to come out also before this board will come loose. And we have this antenna right here as well. So don't start yanking anything out until you're sure you've got everything free and clear. So we need to separate this cable from the tape, just like that. And now we need to get that vibrator loose. So we can take the board out part of the way, but we have to stop because this has to come out. And it is also stuck down with some kind of adhesive. So now that we've gone through that little nightmare, the board is actually out. But we have no time for celebration. So we have to move on. This battery's got to come out because we're going to need that and the charge port dock assembly. Now this battery doesn't have like pull tabs or anything, and even a lot of times pull tabs don't always work. So sometimes they do. When they do, it's really nice. But this one doesn't have any. So we're going to get the screen off of here because we kind of need to do some things. I don't want to put any additional stress on the screen. So we're going to get it out of the way. Now, this is awkward. So this big giant cable has to fit through this little slot in the mid-frame. And there's a couple of places that makes it very easy to tear. So right here would be the number one spot to be sure that if you pull too hard, it'll tear. And then right here, of course, it could tear as well. So all of those areas are really just waiting for someone to give it a good yank. So could we just reach in here and pry this out? No. I mean, we can get it in there a little bit, but it's stuck. So what we're going to do is put some alcohol in between the mid-frame and the battery to soften up the adhesive. Now I can sort of flex the midframe a little bit and see that the battery's starting to get loose. I still can't quite get my tool in between there, but it's probably not a big deal because we're going to reach in with this pick. And that's basically going to give us what we need. A little bit of a gap to get our spudger in there. This is a nylon spudger. We don't want to puncture that battery. Before we set this to the side, we'll just take a look at the part number in case you need to order one. And we'll get a good look at everything so you can kind of compare that to what you're ordering or buying online. If you're ordering something, you might want to just kind of check it out, make sure it matches up. Now we got to work on this charging dock assembly. But before we go there, I want to point out something. So on these little power and volume keys, you'll see this little black dot in the middle. You might want to take a look at that while you've got it open. You'll see this one is not in the center where it should be. It's over to the side. Reminds me of the little googly eyes things that you put on sock puppets. So it's off to the side instead of in the middle. Now, later on we'll sort of finagle that guy back into the middle. But it's not going to matter because ultimately, once you start moving it around, it's just going to slide back over again. So really, there's nothing you can really do. You could pull the membrane off the top there and maybe possibly glue it back down with a little microscopic dot of Loctite super glue or something, but yeah, you could just order another one. Save yourself all that trouble. Or you could just live with it. It will still work. But it kind of gets squashed. You have to press in a little further. Here I'm pointing out where there should have been one of these little guys look like these. Okay? Those are all over the place. And they're from the top and bottom everywhere. So you'll see that this is the one that we're going to use to replace it. You'll also notice if you're ordering one of these online to check where these are located because there is more than one type. There's 2 variants that I'm aware of and they do not match up. Typically, they're going to go by the carrier, whether or not you be AT&T, T-Mobile, that sort of thing, or Verizon, Sprint, or some other carrier. So you can see here on these buttons is the same thing's going on here. So it won't do us any good to switch those cables out because they both have the same problem. Googly eyes. So these are stuck down pretty good. Probably we're going to want to put some alcohol underneath those and loosen them up a little bit. We'll warm them up a little bit as well with a heat gun or a hairdryer. You don't even need the heat if you use the alcohol. We're going to use a very thin metal spudger in this particular case to sort of gently pry them up. And we want to be sure that we don't tear them apart. They are in layers. We don't want to separate those layers, and we don't want to tear the cable. And these again are going to push through little slots in the mid-frame. We'll take a look at the other side here, make sure that we're not doing any damage while we take this out. See, we got stuff under there. Easily could be damaged if you just go digging in there indiscriminately. And we just carefully push these on out. They're a little bit flexible, so they're going to be wibbly wobbling around. Wibbly wobbly. Wibbly wobbling. So we just do a visual inspection. Everything looks pretty good. Now we've got to get the bad battery out of this one and the charging dock. So since we've already been through all of this, we're going to skip it and jump right to putting this in. Now, right there where I'm pointing, that piece of cast metal in the mid frame, this board has to sit underneath that, or it will not fit. It will not sit flat inside the housing there, inside the little mid frame. So pay close attention to that before you just go putting screws in or anything like that. Make sure that that went underneath. And I'll point at it again here in a minute. These guys are just going to lay flat back inside the mid frame where they came from. And there's a little couple of little tiny little posts. These posts are going to kind of help you center those capacitive touch sensors. We'll point those out in a little bit here. So we'll go ahead and put our screw in now that we're pretty sure we've got everything where we need it. So everything looks really good. Nothing's bent, broken, or missing. See these little posts here and here help you to align those sensors. Okay, everything looks good. Let's take a look here and see our board is under this little piece of metal sticking out right there. It's underneath, not on top. Now we have googly eyes over here. So see if we try to move this little dot. See, it doesn't want to stay put. Just keeps moving out of place. And even if we get it nice and centered, which we'll do we'll get it centered in there, it won't make any difference. As soon as we move it, it's just going to go cockeyed on us and be all googly-eyed and stuff. So, oh well. So you'll notice that the little blue, the tiniest little blue antenna wire has a strange routing. That routing can get pinched in there right where a screw goes, so pay close attention that it is not in the way of that screw. Where that screw goes. And we'll set this back down and make sure all our cables are out of the way, not underneath the board. And then our vibrator is seated back down. And double check and make sure that that little tiny blue antenna cable, the one we're connecting now, is not pinched under the board. Because that's the one that's right next to that screw hole, and it can be damaged if you put it over the top of that little screw hole. The screw will just bore itself right in through there, and yeah, that won't be good. You also want to watch out for the little vibrator cable because it's also near one of those little screw holes. Just make sure it's not under there where it can get pinched. Now these cables don't have to be absolutely beautiful, but they do need to be routed in some cases exactly where they came from, in other cases at least close. So you can kind of tell the difference. The three longest ones, they're not quite as big a deal, but all the little short ones, it's very important that they all go back exactly where they're supposed to be. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to get everything put back as close to where they came from as possible. But you can choose whether you want to put all your tape back and all this stuff. That's all up to you. It's not really going to make much difference. It's really there, I suppose, if you were to drop the phone to make sure nothing accidentally disconnects. But, yeah. It's not likely to go anywhere. It's really so tightly packed. If it didn't make a good connection or something, you were concerned about it, then you can always just put some more tape on there. So that cable actually could have run underneath that cable, the flat cable that it's laying on top of. It could have gone underneath it. We could have connected that prior to connecting this big cable with the tape there. But it'll be fine because it doesn't matter whether it's on top or under the tape. But the other longer one is going to actually run kind of through and alongside that metal shield. So we'll zoom in close so you can get a better look. See how that one runs along the metal shield. This one could have run under the tape. That would have been nice, but it's fine like that as well. This one, same thing, could have gone under the tape, but no big deal as long as it's running in its general area. This is important that it was routed exactly the same and not pinched in between the board. This one runs kind of through and around the vibrator. And then, of course, your vibrator cable down there. You can just see the little red, black cable down there. All the little copper, brass-looking connectors. There's a whole contacts. There's a whole bunch of them along the edges and just pretty much everywhere. Can all be dented, bent, broken off. So, and this is the home button. We can just, if we wanted to replace the home button, maybe we damaged the cable or something like that, or it just didn't work, we could take this out very simply. Now, if you have Touch ID or some security feature that you're intending to use, if these are paired to the phone, then that security feature will no longer work. In this case, these are both good. Nothing's wrong with them, but this is just a little extra. Now here we go with this awkward cable that we had to take out earlier. Now we have to put it back in, pretty much in reverse, the way that we took it out. So we've got to be real careful that we don't yank on that as we're pulling it through. So we'll check it real fast, make sure everything's still good and is working before we go any further. Good, we got 70% on that battery. This is the button that has the googly eyes. So now we're at 35. Huh. Did I edit something out? I think I did. Probably got stopped somewhere along the way during this. It happens a lot. Alright, so I think we're at least good enough to move on. So at this point we can go ahead and get the housing put into position, but we have to be careful that we don't put too much pressure on this display. So we're just going to get the mid-frame seated, and then we're going to pull the display back again and put our screws in. So if you want to be able to reuse that display, pay attention, and you'll notice that the cable is on your left. If the phone was in portrait mode and the screen was facing you now. So if you were going to replace the adhesive, you would have had to clean all that off of the display. I personally, those screens aren't that expensive. I just would have replaced the screen. Put some fresh adhesive on the frame. Probably be a good idea, especially with this particular one, to use some type of primer so that you get a very strong bond. But we're going to just go with the original adhesive, and it'll stick down good enough for the purposes of this video. So it's been a pretty long video. As you can see, this particular phone has a lot going on. Lots of places to make mistakes or damage something in the process. I would just say, have fun with it. Take your time. Watch the video over and over a few times before you start. Take pictures ahead of time, whatever you got to do. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, found it interesting, useful in any way. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye now.